Welcome, everyone, to the Penny Stamps Distinguished Speaker Series. My name is Christina Hamilton, the series director. Today, we present playwright, performer, Indigenous, and multidisciplinary artist Émilie Monnet. And a big thank you to our partners as we co-present today with the University Musical Society, or UMS, a longtime and most extraordinary partner to the series, an institution in our fair city. We have additional support from the Arts Initiative and series partners Detroit PBS, PBS Books, WNET's All Arts, and Michigan Public 91.7 FM. I very, very much hope that most of you in this audience were able to take in one of the Nigamon Tunai performances, which Émilie offered to the community over this past week. It was truly a centering experience. And I know I've been thinking about it in the days after, and her message of, we are all water. So with that in mind, let's all learn to flow more like water. I wanted to take this opportunity to foreground another upcoming event and partnership that we have with the University Musical Society. This will be in January, right here on a Thursday, January 29th. This will be featuring Julia Keefe Indigenous Big Band, the Julia Keefe Indigenous Big Band. This is a band that Julia leads. This is with a 16-piece ensemble of Native musicians and highlights the rich history of Indigenous bands. The Penny Stamps event will be that day. The show at UMS will follow directly after in here, so I highly suggest you grab your tickets. Go to ums.org and check that out, and of course, all the other gems they have on tap for you coming up. And remember, students, you do get special prizes, so there's no need to miss. Please do remember to silence your cell phones and get your break from technology here. We will have a Q&A today. You will see there are microphones at the ends of the aisles on stands. And so after her presentation, Émilie will invite you to line up at those microphones and we'll get to as many questions as we have time for. And now for a proper introduction of our guest, please welcome citizen of the Métis Nation of Ontario and Stamps Associate Dean of Research, Creative Practice, and Graduate Education, Dylan Miner.
As we commence Émilie Monnet's talk this evening, it's crucial to remember that the University of Michigan is located on lands of the Anishinaabe, land ceded under the Treaty of Detroit in 1807, and with the 1817 treaty at the foot of the rapids, acknowledging a college at Detroit, which would become this illustrious university. At this moment in the world, continuing to issue land acknowledgements as a way to reconcile history and its ongoing political impact has oddly become controversial, with our Big Ten peer and big house rival Ohio State establishing an institutional policy to prohibit land acknowledgements. Accordingly, their recitation becomes all that more necessary. About Émilie Monnet's artistic practice, a French art festival director once recalled that she, quote, is an indispensable voice for understanding the power of theater that questions colonization and patriarchy, end quote. An artist of Algonquin, Anishinaabe, and French descent, Monnet grew up both on unceded Algonquin territory here on Turtle Island as well as within France. For the past 15 years, Émilie has been artistic director of Onishka Productions, a Montreal-based interdisciplinary arts organization that works globally to bridge Indigenous peoples while recognizing and honoring their respective diversity, richness, and ongoing resilience. For the past decade, she has presented Indigenous Contemporary Scene, a nomadic platform for the dissemination of Indigenous performing arts. Monnet intimately intervenes into our colonial political landscape by intentionally working across Indigenous worlds. She likewise understands that colonialism as a structure was continental in its impact, and as such, she reciprocally builds powerful Indigenous to Indigenous and North to South artistic collaborations. In many ways, Émilie Monnet activates, through interdisciplinary art, what Afro-Caribbean and Francophone intellectual Frantz Fanon discussed more than half a century ago, when he wrote that, quote, colonialism did not dream of wasting its time in denying the existence of one national culture after another. Therefore, the reply of the colonized people will be straightaway continental in its breadth, end quote. This past June, her work, Marguerite Le Feu, was performed at the National Arts Centre in Ottawa as a way to uplift and tell often forgotten stories of Indigenous women. This particular work followed the story of Marguerite du Plessis, a young Indigenous woman who in Quebec in the 18th century saw her own freedom in court, the first time in New France in which a Native person took legal action, as well as the first time an enslaved person used the courts to have their freedom recognized, although unsuccessfully. This month, as Christina noted, alongside Uvattini, an Indigenous Colombian woman of the Inga people, Monnet performed Nigaman Tunai, meaning song, in both the Anishinaabe and the Inga language. This was performed 7 times at the Power Center, 7, a sacred number. This particular artistic and theatrical work challenges the ecological violence of mineral extraction from the Great Lakes to the Amazon. The salience of Monnet's work on Indigenous and ecological issues are particularly timely now. And just this week, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and US President Donald Trump discussed the possibility of revitalizing the Keystone XL pipeline while meeting at the White House. As this indicates, the urgency of Monnet's work remains today, just as it did when she began her career. To end this introduction, allow me to quote directly from Émilie and her collaborator, Uvattini, who remind us that, quote, art creates more understanding and connections between peoples. It enriches the human experience and ultimately can act as a catalyst for generating solidarity, end quote. In a moment of solidarity, please join me in welcoming Émilie Monnet to the Penny W. Stamps Distinguished Speaker Series.
Miigwech Dylan. Kwe kakina. Anijimadzi, and how are you, everybody? It's such a joy and so humbling to be standing in front of all of you. I've loved my time here in Ann Arbor. I've been here for the last 2 weeks, and Ann Arbor have been treating us so well. And I'm very grateful to be standing on the land of the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi people here. So I will offer you a few reflections on the power, the poetics of resistance, and the art of collaborative creation. And to do that, I will present a little bit of my work, my past works, and kind of offer you a few of my reflections in regards to these themes. First, I'd like to situate myself as, like Dylan said, I am Anishinaabe from my mother. My mother comes from a community called Kukum.Émilie in Quebec. It's the French-speaking part of Canada. And my father is from France. So I grew up between 2 territories, the Outaouais, Anishinaabe territory, that you see, this is the river where I grew up, the Tiohtià, the Ottawa River, and also on the Celtic coasts of Douarnenez in Brittany in France, where my father is from. And the Outaouais, I am very, very much informed as a being by the landscape of the rolling hills and the pine trees and the birch forests and the sumac. And I feel that this river, the Tiohtià, is where it really is part of who I am, and it inspires me to move and flow at the rhythm of seasons, where I would see geese fly north and fly back south every year, announcing new cycles. And I always like to go sit by the river and by the rocks, and I find great often great inspiration from the river. And the river has gifted me many songs as well that then I incorporate into my work. In Brittany, there is also a big body of water. My father comes from a village. It's more of a fisherman village. And there I feel that I've been very much informed by the moody, the moody colors of the water and the high cliffs and the moody weather and the tides. And I feel this is where I've learned about the strength of the elements. And when I create work, I like it to be dramatic and intense. And I feel that it comes from that. So I also carry the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean in me. And I feel these two territories, these two bodies of water really inspire me as an artist. And they also, this is where I find strength in my spirit. This is where I connect to my ancestors. This is where I regenerate. And I think it's important to talk about land first because it is a way to situate ourselves. And this is the first collaboration, reciprocal relationship that we have. And it's the one with the land. And it's important to remind that because I believe that that's how, when we have that relationship, when we engage in a reciprocal relationship with the land, then the land gives it back to us. And like I said many times, I've received songs just by sitting by the river. And I believe that inspiration or visions are also messages from the invisible realm. And as artists, that's how we touch. There's an elder, she's not Anishinaabe, she's Innu, but Innu is also an Algonquin language. And she says that there is a tense of verb in all Algonquin languages, which is the verb of the dream. When you conjugate this verb, you know you're talking about the dream world or the vision world. And I find this is very telling of Indigenous worldviews where we have the dream world and the awake time, and they are connected. It's like the flip side of a dime in a way. And when I create work, I always try to pass from one world to the other. So this is the name of my company, my theater company called Onishka. And Onishka in Anishinaabemowin means wake up or get up. And for me, it was a way to think of art as a tool for social transformation. But also, I strongly believe that our Indigenous worldviews and cosmogonies can provide pathways towards more sustainable communities. I believe that through artistic expression, we can really challenge the world we live in. And performing arts is really the art of collaboration because you need a team to create a show. Making a show is a good example of how to be in society. And when we work together, we try to develop a way of relating to the world that draws on the philosophies, the practices, and the knowledge of everybody that is involved in the team. And the processes are always embedded in location, in place, but also in the interrelationships that unfold on the land. So my work often involves knowledge keepers, language keepers, elders, and I try to rely on an approach of being present, of listening, and of caring as well to what is around us. So I'll talk about the first creation that I created, which is called Okinum. This is a performance that I presented back in 2018. And here you see my great-great-grandmother, Mani Pizandawach. I never got a chance to meet her, but I've heard many, many, many stories about her. And Pizanda Watch, our last name before names were changed, means the one who listens. And I'm very inspired about her because growing up, I've always heard stories of how she had a gift, not only the gift of listening, but the gift of healing. And when I started creating Okinum, I was interested to see how that gift was transmitted or lost through the generations of women in my family. Mani, at the time when I was starting to think about her and the legacy within the women in my family, I was about the age that Mani was when the Indian Act was created at the end of the 19th century. And the Indian Act in Canada is a policy, a governmental policy that says that Indigenous people are the pupils of the Queen of England. And that is when reserves were created, and that is when the policies of killing the child in the Indian, as they say it, were implemented or started to be implemented. And it feels through, so from Mani to myself, there are 5 women, from her to me. And it feels like with each generation, something was removed in terms of our connection to our identity. So from a nomadic lifestyle, we were put on reserves, then ceremonies were banned, then residential schools with not being able to speak your language, being disconnected from your family, and also the generation of my mother, an Indigenous woman who would marry a white man would lose her Indian status and would be considered white in front of the law, and meaning all the kids as well. This was a very sexist law as well, because Indigenous men that would marry a white woman, the woman would gain Indian status. So I was interested in seeing the question that I was asking myself is, when do we cease to be native? When is it that the connection is completely lost? When you don't live on the land, when you don't speak the language, when you are not raised in the ceremonies, when do you stop being Anishinaabe and Anishinaabekwe? And the second element that I wanted to braid into the story was this dream that I had of a giant beaver the size of a black bear. And this dream was very significant for me in the fact that I dreamt that dream 3 times over a few years. And in this dream, this beaver came out of the water of the river and stood. And I saw this huge creature that was the size of a black bear. And the beaver walked towards me and put a little pouch into my hand and closed my fingers over this pouch. And the beaver said, Owe di mashkiki, kino aji mino abijitun. It means, this is my medicine. It's yours now. Make good use of it. And then I would wake up. And the funny thing, too, was that every time I made that dream, I would see beavers that same day, or a beaver dam. So the fact that I dreamt that dream 3 times was also a message, I think, that I had to pay attention to this dream, and I had to figure out what was the medicine that this Mishamik, the giant beaver, was giving me. I tell this story too, so Okinum came as a way to decipher this dream and to link it to the women in my family and to that lineage, because I started to see many parallels between beavers and Indigenous women. We use the word beaver to refer to a vagina, for example. In French, there is a word for femme castor, which means in the 19th century, it was a term that we would use to call a woman a prostitute. And there's been the beaver pelts, war, and beavers were almost extinct in Canada and in this territory too. So I see a lot of connections and parallels between colonization and the hunting down of beavers. So I wanted to link those two stories together. But what really fascinated me is afterwards, by talking to elders about my dream, that is when I came to know that giant beavers once existed back in the Ice Age. And actually, I just found out that actually the giant beaver, since May of this year, is Minnesota's official state fossil, because some fossils were found around the Great Lakes. And for me, it was very profound, because it is my dream that that showed me the existence of giant beavers. And later on, then I learned Simon Brakope, he's an elder from my mother's community, Kukum.Émilie, was sharing me how the land back in the Outaouais was actually formed, all these hills, by a giant beaver. So it was incredible to be able to see that. And then I wanted to, so I started writing about these two elements. And then eventually I braided another stream into this work. And it was, I was diagnosed with cancer into my throat. And this is the title of the piece. It's called Okinum. Okinum means beaver dam, a dam. So it's really a reflection on how because of colonization and because of dispossession, things get blocked in us. And what is the work that we have to do to take off all these pieces of wood so that the water of memory can flow again in us? And it felt so telling to braid this stream about my own experience into this theatrical or this play, in the sense that I wanted to show that this is how all these generations of women that we tried to suppress their voices or eradicate them, well, then it manifested in my throat, where my voice, my song is. So Okinum this was filmed actually. This is a clip from a still that was filmed back home. There's a huge beaver dam there, and I went and sat on it, and it became this piece. So it's a reflection on inner dams and what is the work that we have to do to be able to unblock what is blocked in us and what prevents us from connecting to our ancestors and to the memories that we carry. Yes, and also it's a way for me. Art is also a way to reclaim also traditional knowledge and language. I am not a fluent speaker of Anishinaabemowin, and I worked a lot with a language elder. A language speaker, an elder called Véronique Tasky. And with her, so in Okinum, I've started recording a lot of our classes together. And I would ask her about those words that the Mishamik, the beaver, gifted me to understand what they mean. So throughout the piece, you hear a lot of sound recordings and excerpts of our classes where I try to learn the language. So for me, art is also a way to reclaim this. And here you see another elder. Her name is Télèche Béguin. She's from Master-Yash, and she's a specialist of birch bark biting, which is in Anishinaabemowin we call it mazini bakajige, the art of making marks on the birch bark with your teeth. And so we incorporated that because, of course, the teeth of beavers are so important. Beavers die if they stop working because their teeth will always grow, and eventually it will just kill them. They will suffocate them because teeth grow like that. So yeah. So Okinum in a way was really because it was my first piece, it was very autobiographical. After that, I felt like I really wanted to go into more political issues and more collective issues. And this image here is of a work that I did in 2011 called This Time Will Be Different. And I co-created it with an OG Cree choreographer. Her name is Lara Kramer, in collaboration as well with Anishinaabe visual artist Glenna Matouche and her grandchildren. And for this piece, we were really thinking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So in Canada, after the government at the time, Stephen Harper, finally recognized the history of residential schools and made some public acknowledgement of it. There was a big commission created in 1995 called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And we looked at that, but in the light of two other commissions or inquiries. The first one is called the Royal Commission into Indigenous People. This one was created in 1995, and the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women, which came out in 2019. And by looking at these three commissions inquiries and looking at the calls of actions or the recommendations, we see that it's pretty much the same. And so it tells us about how a lot of the time those commissions are created after a big social turmoil. The Royal Commission was created right after the Oka crisis, which was an important social manifestation for Indigenous people in Canada, and the inquiry finally, when Trudeau was elected, this was his promise to put on an inquiry into this situation. So it really shows that history repeats itself, and it makes me think of other teachings that I've heard many times, that if we want to know where we're going in the future, we have to look at the past and see where we come from. And the only way that we can heal and move forward is if we heal the past as well. So this was, it was also very profound, because we presented it in a festival in Montreal called Festival Transamérique, and it was on the day that the report for the inquiry on the missing and murdered Indigenous women came out, and the government recognized that we were in a state of genocide in Canada, and which was a very important acknowledgement symbolically. But to do it on that day felt a way of maybe taking back a bit of power and transforming things. And I think this is also one of the power that art has. It's that it can shift the energy and offer breaches for new possibilities. Then I'll go to this first. As Dylan mentioned, then I got really into this project on Marguerite Duplessis, who actually comes maybe from around here. And this is kind of, because of history, we are all connected in a way, Canada and the States, because this used to be New France back in the times. And in Quebec, the French, there is a history of slavery, but mostly it's Indigenous slavery. And this is something that I wasn't aware of at all growing up. Even slavery, it's not a very, it's not a history that we talk very much about in Canada. We think it comes more from the United States, and Canada was a land of where slaves that would escape could be welcome, which is a total myth. It's not true at all. But we have 200 years of slavery in Canada. And most of the slaves were Indigenous, and they came from this area, or even more Green Bay, and Green Bay and Ohio, and And Marguerite Duplessis was a young woman living on St. Paul Street. So this is in a very mythic street in Montreal, in Old Montreal. And she was an Indigenous woman, and she was an enslaved person. And back in 1740, so many, many, many moons ago, she had a trial. And it was the first time that an enslaved person was able to have a trial, and the first time an Indigenous person as well. And I was really fascinated about that. Like, who was she to be able to convince people, to convince someone to represent her in court, to be able to move things so that she would be heard at le Conseil supérieur de la Nouvelle-France, which was the highest juridical body at the time. And Marguerite Duplessis engaged in a trial because she was sold and resold, and she was going to be deported to the Caribbean, to Martinique, where she would be sold again. And she didn't want to. So on the premise that she was born a free woman, that she was born from an Indigenous free woman and a white father, that she was baptized, and that this was the land of her ancestors, she made a point that she was not a slave, and that there was no reason for her to be sold and shipped to the Caribbean. So I got really kind of obsessed about her for a long time, because she was only in her 20s, and I kept thinking, well, who is she? What a spirit. She must be so connected to her ancestors to be able to fight like that for justice in a world that probably has no justice for her. Like the chances of her winning the trial were so slim, if not impossible at the time. But she did go there anyways, and of course she lost her trial. The judge, or l'intendant, how we call it back in the time in France, in French, was himself a slave owner. So it was very most probable that she would not win. And we don't know what happened to her afterwards. But this was the most important court case at the time, and many people have written about it. And so I started contacting all these people that had gathered information about her. There is a historian from Oregon. His name is Brett Rushford, and he's been very helpful in my research. He wrote a book called Bonds of Alliance, and this book really shows how the French had a commerce or a trade with the Caribbean. So they would capture Indigenous people and they would sell them into the Caribbean. It's a very hidden history. Nobody knows about that in Canada. So with creating Marguerite, when I started to think about her, it was actually when the body of a young Anishinaabe girl, 15 years old, Tina Fontaine, was found in the river in Winnipeg, and the government at the time was saying it was a very unique, that it was not a systemic problem. So there was a lot of upheaval. A lot of Indigenous women organizations started reclaiming that we needed this inquiry put into place. And for me, I started to think of the parallels between Marguerite's story back in the 18th century and the stories of so many women nowadays. And I could see so many parallels between her story and the story of women today. And I wanted to reflect on that. And because in a way, maybe if we don't talk about that, if we don't put an inquiry into place, maybe in the history of tomorrow, in the future, we won't talk about it as being a real problem, an epidemic, the same way that today we don't talk about the slavery of Indigenous people. So I wanted to bring her life and what she did back to the surface, so that we would not forget who she is. In many ways, I refer to her as one of our first Kukum grandmother activists, She was one of the first, anyways, one that we have a trace of. And it was very moving for me to go to the archives in Quebec and to see the trial. And there is a part, I mean, because in the trial, it's her voice being filtered either by the lawyer or the person that writes on paper. But at one point, there is her signature. She signs with her hand. And for me to put my fingers on top of that signature was like a portal. I felt it was I was so moved about being able to put my fingers on top of her writing and to feel she knew how to write. So probably she was saying the truth. I believe that she was a free woman and she was imprisoned and enslaved for the wrong reasons. Here you see her signature. Yeah, and it was very very important. And also I also wanted to create resonances with Black women too, because we don't talk too often about the history of solidarity between our communities. We talk more about the parallels in terms of injustices, but there is also a lot of solidarity. And at the time that we were creating this piece, on stage were 4 women here. This is in Festival d'Avignon in France 2 years ago. And one of them, so this is Catherine Dagenet-Savard. She's from the Wendat people. She comes from the community of Wendake. And we, I forget my train of thought, what I wanted to say about, but I wanted to bring on stage 4 women of Black and Indigenous to be able to say that we are all Marguerites in a way, Marguerites of today. And this is actually a scene in the play where all we do is recite the surnames of, there's an historian in Quebec, his name is Marcel Trudel, and he published, it's a dictionary of slave owners in Quebec, in New France. And not only are all the names of the prime ministers of Quebec in there, but many surnames that are so common to Quebec. So when we do this scene, it is always very impactful because there is a good chance that your surname will be called at one point. It's a scene that lasts about 7 minutes, and we kind of just repeat the list, and Catherine, the dancer, just reacts to every name as if it was a whip, a whip in a way. But after this piece, I think I needed to go into something more that makes me feel more at peace. I mean, it is hard to be working and immerse yourself. I mean, making a show takes you always a long time, at least 2 years. So to be immersed in the injustices and the ongoing legacies of colonization and slavery. And it was at the time that George Floyd his murder was filmed. And we have a similar story in Canada of an Atikamekw woman called Joyce Echaquan. And she also filmed herself at the hospital dying. And you can hear all the racist slurs of all the nurses, and also the fact that she didn't receive proper treatments, and she died out of it. So it shows how history repeats itself, and how it's important to heal history. So this is the piece. So after working on Marguerite, then I started working on this new cycle on love. I think that's what I was craving mostly. And this is a piece that I just presented here in Ann Arbor, Nigamon Tunai, which means song, that I created with my best friend. Her name is Waira Nina. She's an artist from the Amazon in Colombia, from the Inga people. And the the source of the seed for this project was really thinking of love and friendship, and how friendship is an important key, an important concept to think in terms of solidarity. What does it mean to be in solidarity? And for me, it meant being a friend, a real friend, and what that meant. Because in Waida's community, there are many multinationals that are Canadian coming into her community on her territory and extracting in massive ways. And Waida's family has been very targeted for being land defenders. And out of 6 brothers and sisters, only 2 remain. Her 3 brothers were murdered by the war over there and for defending the land. And so I wanted to see how art can also be a tool for her. She often refers it as a process that's been very healing, but how we can engage in beauty, in the sense of creating a space that is very welcoming and inclusive and beautiful. Our set is made out of real trees and bodies of water, and there's rocks too. And we activate the space so these elements, the water can start singing. There's a turntable where we put a rock and the rock starts singing as well. And when creating this piece, we wanted to, Waida did not want to go into saying everything that had happened to her family. So we wanted to create a space where we could be together and we could vibrate to the frequency of each other and to the frequency of the water, and to develop another sense of listening, of acute listening. So then maybe in that state of listening, then we can hear the words of land defenders and spiritual leaders also of our communities that speak about extractivism and the impacts of it. Here you see those are all like invented instruments that we have about copper. So there is a mining company called Libero Cobre, Libero Cooper actually in Canada. They're based in Vancouver, and they are going on her uncle's farm to build a road so they can extract the copper. But this goes over medicinal plants and water springs, and it jeopardizes their spiritual life, their spiritual practices. For example, they built they build, there's workers, so then they built facilities, and there's a bar down the river, and the river is a conductor of sound, right? So now people cannot partake in ceremony on the weekend because they hear the sound of the bar, the music, and so you can't concentrate in ceremony. And so now they have to do less ceremonies or do ceremonies during the week. And on weekends, when people were partaking in ceremony, now they go to the bar. So just how simple in 1 year things changed in the way they live, right? So yes, this is the turntable, as you see, with the rock, and every rock sings. This is another project that I did where I was the resident of a theater in Montreal called Espace Go for 3 years, and I had wonderful access to many resources. So I wanted to also be able to share this privilege that I had with other Indigenous artists, women that I truly admire. And this was a show called Nichimus. Nichimus in Cree means my honey, my lover. So I invited women from all generations to offer something on love and erotica. And here, this is Virginia Bordelot. She's Cree. and she wrote the first erotic novel in French, Indigenous erotic novel. So it was a wonderful experience to just be together as women and to be talking about love and things that make us feel sensual and together. So I think also talking about love is very political. It's an act of resistance because we need more of it in the world today. Okay, and I'll just finish with this last project that I'm creating right now. Yeah, okay, whoops. And it's this one is called Bashk, and it's, oh, sorry about that. And it's, Bashk means burst open in Anishinaabe, and it's my third project on love, around trees, love, and language. And the questions that I am asking myself for this project are like, how are languages connected to the land they originate from? How do trees teach us to better connect with our surroundings? And what do trees can teach us about love? And I specifically look at conifers or pine trees. Pine trees are very much revered in many, many cultures. In my culture too, the pine tree is called Zingwak. And the pine trees are revered for their longevity and their nobility. Often we refer to them as the chief of the forest or the grandmother of the forest. And I believe that pine trees offer us keys to rediscovering a more cyclical, rooted, and multi-generational time. And by reversing scales and points of view, I am hoping to offer a different quality of listening and maybe rediscovering the sound of a lost language. And there, when I started creating this piece, I wanted to do something about the fact that I speak multiple languages, and I've often learned a language because of love, because I fell in love. And so I started, and I wanted to explore this sensual connection to language. But as I was writing, I kept writing about trees and the language of trees, and this mourning to find back this language. It made me think of a story that we have that Véronique Tusky, the elder that I was talking about earlier, had shared with me once of how humans have the ability to understand and communicate with trees before in a very tangible way. And humans being humans, we kind of did not engage in a reciprocal, or we did not make the most of that gift. And so at one point, the trees decided to have a great council where the Anishinaabe were invited, and they took away that ability to hear them, and they left a song, and they left some gifts from each tree for the humans, but they removed that ability to be able to hear them. And so I'm very inspired about that, and what is that language, and how do trees communicate between themselves, and how can we rekindle that ability that we once had? So I am hoping that trees can help us or inspire us to take better care of the environment and the permanence of old growth forests as well. And voila. So I guess that's what I have to offer. And I'll take some questions now.